I hope everybody's feeling good. I'm feeling good today. And we're going to get right into it. Ladies and gentlemen, especially ladies, I want to welcome each and every one of you to episode 3 of the Game 7 podcast, where we're going to be discussing a bunch of different topics. I'm Pete. I'm going to take you through those topics. And today, those topics are going to include the Federal Reserve interest rate decision that they just did yesterday. We're going to talk about NFL Week 2 recap, my top storylines from there, and then we're going to end with a quick presidential race update based on what we're looking at in the betting markets, and we're going to get right to it with the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve cut 50 basis points at their meeting yesterday. So the Fed is run by Jay Powell. Everybody's seen the meme of him with the money gun. Basically, yesterday they officially cut 50. They're going to project another 50 basis points in cuts for the rest of this year and another 100 for next year. So the Federal Reserve is the U.S. central bank. They're the ones that are supposed to make sure that nothing happens to the banking system and that they're like the lender of last resort, and they kind of help just in case there's some sort of a financial crisis. They're the ones that are supposed to step in those instances. But most importantly, their main function is that through monetary policy, which is setting the interest rate, the federal funds rate, they're supposed to either try and slow down inflation or help spur economic growth. So their goal with the monetary policy, they use interest rates to influence the economy. The banks, now this is why that's important. The banks use the federal funds rate as a benchmark for what type of loan rates and borrowing costs that people are going to get for taking out credit. So over the last couple of years, since 2022, the Fed took the rates from 0 up to between 5 and 5.5%. So because of this, it makes it so that credit is harder to get. And if, just look at housing mortgages, for an example. 2 years ago, you get a house for 3 to 4%. Now you're looking more like 7 to 8%, and that's for like a well-qualified buyer. So by the Fed starting to lower interest rates, what they're basically letting the economy know and America know is that they're going to continue to lower it more. So their goals are also to make sure that prices remain stable. That's why when inflation was going crazy, they raised the interest rates to try and bring those prices under control from running away too high. Also, let's see what else they got. So they're also supposed to, this is very important, in addition to price stability, is they're supposed to maintain maximum employment in the economy. So their goal is to make sure that a lot of people don't get unemployed, because the basic idea of interest rates is that when money is easier to access, people are going to grow their businesses because it's cheaper to borrow money. And if you grow your business, one of the things that you do when you grow your business is you hire more employees. So that's the idea. So the Fed is doing this for multiple different reasons. I think that the main reason that they waited till right now, this is the last Federal Reserve meeting before the election. So you got to remember, even though the Fed is an independent organization, they're appointed by the government. Like Jay Powell had to go through a selection process and be nominated by the government and be selected. So they're supposed to be independent of whatever the government is doing, though they work hand in hand with the government. So him doing a 50 basis point cut before the election, it should help goose the stock market a little bit because, if he gets, depending on who gets elected, the economy is going to have a big part to do with it. So he has a large role to play in that. So he kind of let us know that this is what was coming. So everybody knew that the rates were going to be cut. The question was, is it going to be 25 basis points or 50 basis points, which is either 0.25% or 0.5%, right? So just think about that interest rate that we were talking about. Basis point is just a fancy way of saying 1 percentage point. So when they say 50 basis points, they mean 50 percentage points. So think about 1%, 50 basis points is 50% of that. So he let everybody know in Jackson Hole. At Jackson Hole, he let everybody know that the monetary policy stance that they had was going to shift from being restrictive and hawkish. Those are the two terms you're going to hear a lot. Restrictive and hawkish means that they're keeping rates high and they're trying to keep inflation down because inflation is going up. And the idea behind that is simple. I'm gonna explain that in a moment. And then when they're dovish or accommodative, which is now the monetary stance that they've entered into, means that they're going to encourage economic activity. So the way that interest rates accomplish this is simple. So just imagine that the government bond rate is like 5%, which is what it's been for the last couple of years, right? For a short-term government bond. If you can just get 5% risk-free, the reason that they say that it's risk-free is because the safest asset in the world as of now and the way people view it, the most liquid market in the world, is U.S. Treasury bonds, right? Because they're backed by the U.S. government. Right now, the U.S. government is still way more stable economically than anybody else, and that's looked to as the risk-free rate. So you put the money in there, even though the price of the bond may change, it's very unlikely that the government is going to go out of business. If the government goes out of business, we're in all kinds of other trouble. So what happens is when you take a 2-year bond, 5-year, 10-year bond, the idea is you give the government this money for this set period of time. During this period of time, they pay you an interest rate because they borrowed this money from you. So when they borrow this money from you, you can sell the bond before its maturity. And when I say its maturity, that's when the bond's time period is up, right? So if it's a 10-year bond that you're getting 5% for, basically you're saying, here's $100 U.S. government. You're going to pay me $5 a year for the next 10 years. And then at the end of the 10 years, I get my $100 back. The reason that that's considered risk-free is because when you look at other investments, like a stock, for example, even Apple is the best company in the world as far as making money and one of the best brands. Technically speaking, Apple could go out of business, right? Something could happen where, they do something illegal or whatever it is, right? Even though it's very, very unlikely, just like it's very unlikely that the government is going to go out of business anytime soon. It's possible, but it's unlikely, right? It's a low probability. So, like, if you get a corporate bond from somebody like Apple, it's going to be close to treasury rates that you get from the U.S. government because Apple is considered such a good business. Now, if you go to an up-and-coming company that doesn't make a lot of money, they're going to be giving you a lot more interest because you're taking on more risk, right? So, like, let's say it's an up-and-coming biotech company. They're working on a cure for some sort of disease. You don't know if it's going to work. So there's always a chance that it doesn't work, but they need money, so they raise rates. I mean, they raise money by selling bonds. Those bonds might get 10%, 15%, which sounds crazy. But in reality, there's a higher chance that at the end of the 10 years, you're not going to get your money back. But that's why they give you a higher interest rate to do so. So the risk-free rate everybody goes off of is U.S. Treasuries. Those are the ones that the government sells in different time increments to fund different government spending, which we know they do a lot of. And that's considered risk-free because you don't think the government's going to fail. So if you're getting 5% to just sit there and do nothing and have no risk, people are going to save more money. So I said all of that. Basically, here's the main point. When you have money and you're able to get money for saving that money and not spending it, that should slow down economic activity, right? Economics 101. Every dollar that you spend is a dollar that someone else receives, and then that's another dollar they could spend, and on goes the cycle as money flows through the economy. So when people are saving more because interest rates are high and you're getting a certain amount of money to just sit around and not do anything, economic activity should slow down. So that's how the interest rate kind of sets how much activity is going on, right? So now if the interest rates are high, people can't get approved for as much money, housing prices, all those things are going to be affected by what interest rate people can get for the money that they want to borrow. So if the interest rates start to come down, money becomes easier to get. Money starts flowing more through the economy. That's the idea behind where they're going and what they're now calling their accommodative stance and being dovish. The two animals they use is dove and hawk. Hawk means restrictive, like I said before, when they're, raising rates or keeping rates high. Dovish or accommodative is when they're starting to lower rates and try to kind of give more liquidity to the system. So that's the shift that we've gone through. Now, they did 50 basis points. Now, there's no guarantee that they're going to do more rate cuts before the end of the year. They come out with what's called a summary of economic projections. Basically, that's just a chart of what all the members of the Federal Reserve kind of think about as or look at here. This is what we think we're going to do. Data can always come in and change those ideas that they have, and the projections can change at any moment. But as of right now, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, is basically letting us know that rates are coming down, right? He already started with half a basis point, 50 percentage points, and he says that they're going to continue to do so. So think about how that's going to affect you. Like I said, it's supposed to spur more economic activity. Right now, the unemployment rate's still in the 4% range. They're looking at it like, okay, potentially more economic downturns may be coming. So in order to front run that, that's one reason that they might be lowering interest rates. Another reason that they might be doing it is what I mentioned earlier, that they might just be trying to get that last little goose of the stock markets and different things so that, it looks good for the presidential incumbent, or in this case, the vice presidential incumbent that's running for president. So because they're the person that's going to decide whether they want to nominate him again. I believe his term is up next year or the year after. So if he wants to keep his job, they might be pressuring him behind the scenes. So people are looking at this. It could be a politically motivated decision. And now we're going to find out if inflation is really under control. So the reason that they've been this restrictive for the last couple of years is because everyone knows, you all felt it. Prices were going crazy. Inflation was going crazy. So they did what they had to do to bring inflation down. And remember, I personally think that supply shocks did have something to do with the inflation from COVID, right? Because remember, everybody in COVID, it was hard to get things. You couldn't get people to work, and different supply chains got messed up. And there's a combination of people taking advantage and just raising prices because they could. But I also think that they doubled the money supply. If there's double the money available, that money has to find places to go. That's why the stock market has run up crazy over the last couple of years. So there's still all that underlying money or liquidity. So now that rates start to come down, if people start to put that money to work, we're going to see if inflation comes back. And if inflation comes back, then they're going to have to tamp down how accommodative they want to be. And that's something that they gave themselves with the way that the Fed is set up. They do this meeting every 45 to 60 days. And they decide, all right, based on the data that we have, do we continue down this path that we kind of set in motion? Or do we start to change? They have optionality. Right after the election, they might go right back to, we just don't feel it's appropriate to continue to do so. I think that in the short term, it's gonna basically cause a little bit of a push into the stock market. I think small cap companies, I mentioned this on a previous podcast, I think small cap companies are going to start to catch up to the mega caps, because the reason that people want to stay away from smaller companies when interest rates are high, it goes back to what I brought up about how companies raise money. They either do it through profits or they do it through offering bonds. So if a company is a little bit more unsafe as far as their future goes, it's going to be harder for them to raise money because they're going to have to pay much higher rates, which is going to be difficult for them to do. Whereas if rates are low, they can get lower rates for their bonds. They don't have to pay out as much interest. It's going to help fuel more growth in those lower companies. Companies like Apple, Google, Microsoft is not going to affect them. There's the most fiscally responsible companies in the world. They just print money, basically. So they're not going to be as affected by this. But smaller companies will. And that's why I like what Tom Lee, he's a contributor for CNBC, and he talks about a lot of different things. Ever since COVID, he became real popular because he was very, very positive early on. So he thinks that small caps also will break out. And the reason that he gave for this was that historically, when you get like a market top, meaning that we hit the highs of this particular cycle, small caps will confirm that. And right now, with the price to earnings ratio that small caps are trading at, which he mentioned were 10, this would be the lowest that they've ever traded at relative to close to being at a market top. So before we can kind of hit whatever that high is going to be during this cycle, he thinks that small caps need to confirm it. I actually agree. I already felt like small caps were going to start to break out. That was part of the reason behind the trade that I have. I'll give more of an update on that. I'm going to be in that trade for probably another week, another month. But I'll go into that trade update in a moment. But yeah, so the other idea behind bonds versus, using your money. So now, like I said, if you were getting 5 to 6% or whatever it is that you're getting to just sit around, now you have to look for more risk. And again, that also feeds into that small cap narrative that people are going to look for more growth stocks because they're going to be looking to try and make up that yield that they're not going to get as easily from bonds, which are supposed to be risk-free. Now, as far as the update on my trade, I currently am down on it. The two companies that I'm in are Sports Radar and Genius Sports. I think that, sports betting is huge. We're in the midst of the NFL season. The NBA season is getting ready to kick off. They're both at points on the chart that can show like a potential breakout about to happen. Hopefully it happens during the time period that I'm in the trade. I like to share my trade as for informational and entertainment purposes. So I think that they still have a chance with the decision that the Fed made. I think that's going to give them that gasoline to kind of break out. That's the fuel that they need. The other market outlook that I kind of want to go into the weeds a little bit of what I think is going to happen over the next couple of years. So I think that we are going to be heading for a very, very large drop in the stock market just because when it goes up like this, at some point, it does have to come down. The tricky part is trying to time it, right? I got no clue when that can happen. It can happen probably next year or the year after. I do think it does come in the next couple of years, and I'll start to position for that accordingly. I think we probably run up into the end of the year, especially into the election. If I see a drop in like the big stocks, I might look for a chance to get into those to try and catch a run into the end of the year. But I do think eventually we are going to see a really, really big drop, and the Fed's not going to have as many tools to try and get us out of it just because of all the money that's been printed. Inflation potentially coming back is a real thing. If you want to look at the history of inflation, just look up, when Arthur Burns was the Federal Reserve chairman and how they, had to raise interest rates like, I think it was like 10, 15%. They came down and then it came back up. That's what a lot of people are pointing to that's going to potentially happen here. We don't know yet. We're in a very different time. Like I said, we've never gone through the type of situations we've gone through over the last few years. So it's going to be hard to have history draw a parallel to what's happening now. But one thing is for certain, human psychology tends to work in cycles. Eventually, you're going to get everybody FOMOing in at one point, and then at some point, everybody's going to get fearful. We just don't know when that cycle is going to happen. This is what Warren Buffett has famously taken advantage of over his decades of investing, and this is why he just continuously raises cash and looks for good opportunities to enter the market when he feels like his quote, blood on the street. So that's what I think is going to happen as far as the stock market, and I think it's a big deal. I'm going to just wrap up my thoughts on what the Federal Reserve did here. I think it's a big deal that they are starting this accommodative part of the cycle here. And we don't know how this is going to go because inflation could come back. Those are the main things that we got to look for. How low can they get interest rates? How fast can they get them there? What type of economic downturn do we get as a result of what they possibly see? They're trying to front run any sort of economic downturn. Let's see if they're successful in doing so. And let's see how low they could get rates. And let's see if inflation comes back. Those are going to be the main things I'm looking for. Now that we're done with the Federal Reserve, let's talk about Week 2 of the NFL. I think we got to start with the injuries. It was a lot of injuries, man. A couple players that I had on my fantasy team, like Cooper Kupp, the Rams are decimated. It's just crazy how things change in the NFL from one week to the other. We just look at some of the games that we had. I will tell you that, like, these injuries is nasty, right? Tua, another concussion. That was scary. Everybody that's seen the concussions that he's had before, I think his career is really in jeopardy. He says he wants to play. They put him on the IR. But those type of hits, I've never seen a player look the way that he's looked after being hit the way that he was being hit. We lost Deebo Samuel for a little while. Hollywood Brown is out for the year. I'm going to talk about that in a moment when I go into my Kansas City Chiefs update. A.J. Brown goes down. He's going to be out for a couple of weeks. Isaiah Pacheco is hurt. It's a lot of big players that are hurt. So I'm going to go into the Chiefs in a second. So these are my takeaways from week 2. Buffalo Bills are for real. Looks like that Josh Allen is now my front runner for MVP. I think that offense looks good. His team looks good so far. We're going to see if they continue to, keep doing well, whether or not he's going to have enough weapons if he gets into a shootout with like a really high octane team later on in the playoffs. That was my reason for not wanting to go with the Bills. We'll see if Keon Coleman could step into that role. He is starting to run a lot more routes. He's there for a lot of snaps, but for whatever reason, he's just not being targeted that much. We'll see if he could grow into that role because that's going to be really important. James Cook's been a monster running the ball. And look at the Niners. This is why we all love the NFL. The NFL is crazy. The Niners beat who I think is going to win the Super Bowl, and they beat them dominantly. And then they go lose to the Vikings. You know what I mean? To Sam Darnold. And think about that for a second. You go from beating the Jets, where Aaron Rodgers, to the guy that couldn't win on the Jets, Sam Darnold. It beats the Niners. It's crazy. I know Debo got hurt, but they're still talented enough to get it done. I still like them to come out of the because it does look like McCaffrey's coming back. It does look like Debo's coming back. And they got Ayuk, that offensive line. They got that defense, and they got Kittle. I think Kittle's going to be blowing up these next couple of weeks until those guys come back. We got Giants still stink. It's my team, but they not it. Chargers are 2-0. Means nothing to me. Yeah, they're doing, they're winning the first couple of games. We'll see where they go with that. The New Orleans Saints lit up the Cowboys. Cowboys, they got lit up. We'll see if they could continue. Saints are a little sleeper team to come out that division, though, between them and the Buccaneers. We'll see out of those two who ends up coming out of there. Packers got a little win without Jordan Love, who's back at practice already. We'll see if they get him back soon. Browns got a victory. The Browns are another sleeper team. If Deshaun Watson could get he can get to 80-90% of what he was before. They got weapons. Nick Chubb should come back. They got a great offensive line. They got a great defense. They're another sleeper team that we need to be looking out for. We're going to talk about the Jets in a second. The Buccaneers got the Lions. I still think the Lions are going to be one of the better teams. I don't think the Bucs are going to make noise in the playoffs, but they got a big win against the Lions. Raiders got a win. Ravens are in trouble. They're 0-2 already. Them and the Bengals are 0-2. And the Bengals, I'm going to talk about that game more because that's going to involve the Chiefs. Rams are just hurt. They got nobody out there. The Cardinals cooked them. That boy Kyler Murray is back. That's all I know. That's why it wasn't just me. It's not like I said anything profound when I said that Kyler Murray's going to have a big year this year. A lot of people already felt that way. That was like a consensus thing that Kyler Murray was going to have a great year. Steelers got to win. They're 2-0 again. Ew, Mike Tomlin, man. Caleb Williams not looking too good so far in his first couple of starts. Texans got him. Caleb got to continue to get better, right? We gotta remember he was playing across from the greatest rookie of all time at quarterback, right? Like C.J. Stroud was like damn near MVP candidate last year, and he's continuing to look good. The Texans are still going to be a tough team to beat. And then the Eagles gave it up against the Falcons, man. They had that win. Saquon dropped the ball, but you got to give Kirk Cousins credit for marching down the field, and I think that was big for his confidence. He is coming off that the ACL, the Achilles injury, and he's on a new offense. And one of the quarterbacks I was listening to mentioned that the 2-minute drill is one of the most comfortable things, especially for a new quarterback, because forget what all the system is. It's like, you know, the plays that you're running, and it's just a matter of executing the plays. I think that that's going to be big for his confidence. I really do expect the Falcons offense to be really, really great this year with Kirk Cousins at the helm. Bijan Robinson looked great. The Eagles can't stop the run. They used to be known for stopping the run. Bijan was giving them business. So that's kind of like around the league what my takeaways were. Now let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. 2 big injuries. We got the report that Hollywood Brown is going to be out for the year, potentially could come back for the playoffs. That's going to be tough for the offense because he's an established threat that I felt was going to be really great to stretch the field in addition to Xavier Worthy. And by having Hollywood Brown out there, it takes the pressure off of Worthy. And it's like you kind of have both of them to help free up Kelsey and Rashee Rice. Now Worthy's going to have to step into more of a larger role. And I think he has the talent, he has the right coaching, and he has the right guys around him to make that happen. But we'll see what he can do to help elevate that offense further. You saw, a couple targets last week, but didn't really do much. We got it was a really, really great game between the Bengals and the Chiefs. I swear to God, Joe Burrow and Tom Brady, those are the only guys that seem to be able to beat the Chiefs. I mean, Josh Allen has been in the situation that Burrow was in this past game. Like I swear that's what happened to Josh Allen all the time. He'll leave the field 12 seconds with the lead, and these guys just march down the field to do something crazy. But the Bengals are 0-2. They looked a lot better, though. Like I said, the Chiefs, to me, were the best team in the league coming into week 2. And after that horrible display that they did against the Patriots, and this has become a theme for the Bengals, they just seem to get off to slow starts. Last year, Burrow was hurt, so I get it. But they need to start clicking. T. Higgins should be coming back soon, and that offense is going to start to be high-flying again. And they're not afraid to go into Arrowhead, right? Joe Burrow's beat Mahomes. He's beat him in the playoffs, so they're going to be tough, but they got to get it together. It's in the NFL, you can't get off to too bad of a start because it becomes hard to pick up enough momentum to get into the playoffs. So that the injury to Isaiah Pacheco is big too. He's a really good running back, and he's one of the keys to the offense being able to execute at the level that is able to execute at with the Chiefs. I want to talk about something I heard on ESPN earlier today in a moment, and I'm gonna reference back to Isaiah Pacheco as an example. But him being out, they're saying he might be out like 8 to 10 weeks. That's gonna be a big loss. And then what is he gonna look like when he comes back? Because he really runs angry. He really adds an element of toughness to that offense. But if there's any quarterback that you want to have in a situation where everything seems to be falling apart, you just lost one of your top weapons, and then you lost something that makes the game easier with running the ball, it's definitely Patrick Mahomes, and we're going to see what he could do. So I think it's going to be between him and Josh Allen for MVP, and then C.J. Stroud might sneak into there too. C.J. Stroud's up there too. I actually take back what I said about Allen. It's just people were expecting a lot from the Texans, and I don't think people were expecting too much from the Bills. I definitely wasn't in that camp of expecting too much from the Bills. Now for the Jets got on the board. I mean, we expected them to beat Tennessee. Like I said, their schedule is a little bit forgiving right now. Today's Thursday when I'm recording this. They got a Thursday night game against the Patriots. They should win that game. That should be no problem. And just like that, they're going to be 2-1. And they're going to continue to get better as the season progresses. I want to see them really start to add Mike Williams into the offense. I think that's going to be huge. Aaron Rodgers is slowly going to start to get close to the form that he's capable of. So the Jets are going to continue to do well. I think that they're going to get some momentum, and then we'll see, how the season progresses. But the Chiefs definitely took a hit with losing Hollywood and Isaiah Pacheco. Those are 2 big losses that Kansas City is going to have to overcome. And we'll see how well they're able to do so. And I was definitely wrong as far as one of my, and this is what I was watching on ESPN. I was definitely wrong about I felt offense was going to take a big jump earlier in the year. And I heard an interesting reason for why. Mel Kiper was talking about banning two deep safety defenses on the field. Like they can't be past a certain depth. And I think this defense really started to be like the Bills always played like this. The Bills will always keep everything in front of you. And Kansas City, everyone just started to play them with their safeties back and try to force everything underneath and rally to make tackles. And what that does when you don't allow, so let me break down the benefit. They call it the Tampa 2, right? Two deep safeties, meaning the two guys that are at the end of the defense that are far back in the field to keep big plays from coming over the top of their heads. So by doing stuff like this and not giving up those easy big plays, even if you let them march down the field, now once you get to the red zone, this is where the most difficult part of the field is to execute because the defense has less of an area to have to defend and the offense has less of an area to work with, right? So this is what the Chiefs have been dealing with the last couple of years because they've had nobody to stretch the field. But one of the things that Patrick Mahomes was able to shift to was taking what the defense gave him. Check downs, getting the 10-yard route. Tom Brady was a master of this. Because if you're just going to give me an 8-yard completion, a 6-yard completion, a 4-yard completion, and we're going to run the ball on second and 2, and just keep moving the chains, you don't have to get it all in one play. And that's why Patrick has become so great because he's been able to orchestrate an offense that doesn't need one monster play to just score. He'll just march down the field on you. That's what he's become really good at, and that's what Tom Brady was so great at. Tom Brady would just march down the field and take what the defense gives you. That's why having a quarterback and a receiver on a string to be able to operate within that 5 to 15 yard, maybe even to 20 yards in the field and kind of be on the same page to be able to move the chains in the playoffs is so important. And that's why the Chiefs continue to win. And that's what I think the Jets can do with him and with Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson. And you're starting to see the way they're operating now. So Mel Kiper was saying, you got to take away the two deep safeties. Listen, if quarterbacks can't take advantage of that, and I mean, that's why you run the ball, right? That's why the loss of Isaiah Pacheco is going to be tough because now if you don't have somebody strong to run the ball, you can start to take those safeties back. Now, let's just strategically talk about defense for a second. Now we get into football weeds, but strategically, the way you get a defense out of that two deep safety look is you got to run the ball. Because if you run the ball, they're not going to have enough people to defend the run. You can just start getting 5 yards, 6 yards. That's what the great offenses are doing. And what they brought up was a good point. I didn't think about it like this. And this brings up what Tom Brady said recently about quarterbacks playing too soon and then the offense is being simplified because they're not able to learn more nuances of the offense because they have to play so soon. I thought he was crazy when he said this, but it's starting to make a little bit of sense. We have all these young quarterbacks in the league. If you just play deep safeties and they're not able to read the defense as fast and they can't just go and just go 5 yards, that they make a mistake, it makes sense that scoring is down across the league because they're not taking advantage of what the defense is giving them because they're not able to break the defenses down yet. The people who do it, the great offenses year in and year out, you look at teams like the Chiefs, even though their offense wasn't as explosive the last couple of years, you look at like the Bills the last couple of years, you look at the Eagles, they got a running game, they got people that can attack you in all parts of the field, but then people like Joe Burrow or Josh Allen, they'll take, Josh Allen will run for 8 yards. Josh Allen will throw for 8 yards if he has to. That's what the great quarterbacks are able to do. So they gotta. I thought it was a good point, but if people are gonna play safeties back, you gotta run the ball. Kansas City is the prime example of what happened when they said, we tired of this Tyreek Hill over the top doing all this type of stuff. And Mahomes even said he had to learn to just take what the defense gave him. So it actually makes sense. So if you're going to run the ball a lot more and, the game slows down, that is going to make it a little bit lower scoring, in addition to what we see with the sloppy play to start the season, which I'm just waiting for when they figure out, like, to just start sharper. But it looks like only the elite offenses are going to be the ones capable of doing that. So that was an interesting point I thought that they brought up, and it's going to be, I want to see how the Chiefs are going to navigate. I think they brought back Kareem Hunt. They got Carson Steele and Samaje Perine. None of those guys are going to be as good as Isaiah Pacheco. Kareem Hunt, it was always somebody that if a team needed a running back as like an injury replacement, he was probably on their radar. But the fact that he wasn't on a team is kind of telling. But it's interesting that he's back in KC where he left before. We'll see what type of energy he can bring that team. So I don't know. I think that that's a reasonable point, but I think it's completely ludicrous to tell defenses that you can't play your safeties back. The offenses got to adapt. They got to run the ball, and they got to be able to march down the field with 8 yards at a time. And most importantly, you got to learn how to score in the red zone. The greatest quarterbacks, they always score in the red zone without throwing interceptions. And that makes a lot of sense because if you don't give up that big play and you force them down, you give up a little bit, and then you get to the red zone, and then at the red zone, you just tighten up. I mean, that's the thing the Patriots were known for a lot over the years. The best defenses all do it, and it's a copycat league. And quarterbacks got to learn to take advantage of that and get better in the red zone. That's why the Chiefs are so good at scoring, too. They come up with all these gadget plays. You got Mahomes and Kelsey that are on a string together. So that's how they're able to exploit it. But it's time for the young QBs out there in the league. They got to step up, and they got to start taking advantage of those opportunities. And last thing I want to talk about with the NFL, so far it's been a rough start for me and my bets for the year. First couple of seasons haven't really gone my way. Last week, I think I went 2 out of 5 of my 5 plays that I liked, lost my parlay, but we're going to be right back to it this week. I want to talk about them because I had a little bit more time. I'm going to talk about my favorite ticket. So I like, hold on, let's get this up here. So there's reports that Nico Collins is banged up. You got Joe Mixon banged up. So I feel like getting Stephon Diggs at 48.5 is going to be beneficial. I like to grab players before their number moves just in case the player's hurt. Plus, he has a chance to get 50 yards anyway. But I like that little extra advantage. I like Dallas Goedert this week. If you like Devontae Smith, Devontae Smith is a good play too with A.J. Brown being out. I like Goedert for 40 against the Saints who have been scoring. So I think 40 is a good look. I like Kelsey at 48.5. I just think that they're going to make it a priority to get him the ball this game. And with him having a slow start to the season, I just think they get him a couple of plays early to get him going. And I always like, if I could get Amon-Ra under like 90 yards, I feel like I'm going to take him every single time. I got him at 76.5. And then I think I got Marvin Harrison at 57.5. Lions going to put up points. As a fact, I think we're going to see another shootout with the Lions and the Cardinals. And then the one other play that I like for the week is George Kittle at 51.5. So those are the 6 that I like this week. And again, the reason I like George Kittle at 51.5 is Ayuk is still kind of rounding back into form. It's a similar situation and spot to what the Eagles have with one of their receivers down. And you could go either way. Ayuk could have a good game. You could have Kittle have a good game. They are going to be playing against the Rams, which they probably going to blow them out. I feel bad. The Rams lost both their top receivers. Their O-line's all banged up. So there's a little bit of a blowout risk that I worry about with that one. But those are the ones that I like. And that's it for the NFL for this week. And then let's go into the last thing I want to do. For the last section today, we're going to go into our update weekly that we like to do on the presidential election. And as usual, if you've heard this podcast before, I got a political disclaimer, which is you are not going to get a partisan. It's going to be a nonpartisan take. It's going to be unbiased. And if you came here looking for an echo chamber, you're not going to get one. Go somewhere else for that. But what we will look at is we're a week removed from the debate. Let's see what the poly market odds are right now. And they got Harris at 52%, Trump at 47%. Again, it's close, but it's crazy the the difference that a month has made and all the momentum that's behind Harris now, and it looks like Trump's starting to lose momentum after the debate. Even some of the conservative outlets said there were moments that he could have done better. You know, he kind of took the bait from her a little bit. I'd be interested to see if they get a second debate to see how that works. But we still got time left to see how things are going to shift out. I don't know who's going to win. I think it's a coin flip. And we'll see who ends up taking it home once we do get to where people go to the polls. But that's everything I got for you this week. That's it for episode 3. So until next time, I'm out of here.